Okay, we're back. We talked a little bit about the some of the inherent problems with magnetic tape and sort of the design of the tape, and I'm going to discuss some of the problems I've experienced in recovering the Conway's recorded materials on the We Are the Iroquois series. Okay, I guess the first thing we'll deal with is in the reality in 1982 and in the 80s when these recordings were originally made. They recorded on the 12-inch, quarter-inch analog magnetic tape format. Now, at the time, the tape was very expensive. It was pretty much the state-of-the-art technology at the time. It was pretty expensive to come by. And at K103, we basically used tapes which were donated by a friend of ours at the CBC. As they threw out their old tapes, we received them and repurposed them for use in things like commercials, public service announcements, and We Are the Iroquois series. Now, what happens is when you receive an old tape or a tape which has already been recorded on once, what you need to do is you need to pass it over an electromagnet called a bulk eraser. It's basically a giant magnet with an electrical current passing through it. And you take the tape, you slide it across the surface of the bulk eraser, and what that does is it scatters the magnetic impression of the iron oxide particles on the surface of the tape, thereby cleaning the tape in essence and allowing you to record new materials onto the tape without any kind of interference or ghosting or the previous material passing through. Now, what I'm assuming had happened at the time, these tapes have been repurposed and reused many, many times over, and over time becomes more and more difficult to scatter those magnetic impressions. And I'll show you an example of one thing that I've encountered so far in restoring the We Are the Iroquois series. And I'll just move over to my laptop here and take my glove off so I can affect the keyboard. I'll move it over here a bit. I'll play an example. I hope you can hear it over there. What you'll hear at the end of Conway's program after he's finished with his narrative, you'll hear some French language content coming through in the background. Now, the French language content is not just there in between the programs, but it's also bleeding through underneath Conway's recorded segments. So what we have to do is pass through specific filters which have been customized and modified specifically for the purpose of taking out these exact bleed throughs is what we call them, or print through recordings. So I'll play an example of what that sounds like.
To test a Hunter's London rifle. Mignon d'ailleurs, Jones. Tandonega, part 3.
Okay. Oh, so if you've heard that, you heard the French language content passing through at the end of Conway's segment. Before that, the French language content's still there, so whenever Conway pauses, you're going to hear this print through from the earlier recordings which had not been totally erased. So now what we have to do is be able to fingerprint, literally take a snapshot of the frequency and the dynamics at play relative to that particular previously recorded French language content, and assign filters to be able to remove them. It's not easy, it's not perfect, it's a bit of art and science matched together, and the results are mixed sometimes. The problem with processing it too many times, if you try too hard to remove all the print through content, you end up affecting the signal that you want, and it becomes over processed, and you have what we call sonic artifacts which are introduced, and they come out in the form of what's called flanging, a sort of warbling effect, sort of as if the speaker was speaking underwater. I'm going to find another example of another problem we're also experiencing in the process. Let me just sort of back up here. Okay, now I made reference earlier, let me put my glove back on. I made reference earlier to tension on the tape reels. When you start up a tape, there's the inertia, that initial fast jerking action that happens when a tape is mounted. So here's a body at rest, the tape is sitting still, and upon immediately hitting engagement of the start mechanism, the tape is jerked very hard. And so that's why we have the plastic leader at the front of it, which is the non-magnetic portion of the tape, which can't actually be recorded on. And that's meant to absorb most of the impact. I'll show you an example here. That's meant to absorb most of the impact of that initial tension. Now, when you stop recordings midway through and then you start restart the process back over again, that tension is again placed on the tape, and the tape inevitably stretches over time. Now, when the tape stretches, it actually stretches the actual recorded content on it so that it changes the pitch of the recording, and much like as if you were adjusting the variable speed controller on the tape recorder. Now, also worth considering at the same time is the technology that was being used at K103, without any insult or injury to K103 at the time, because we were working with a marginal budget and making do really with what we had at the time. Was that the large reels were being placed on machines that were originally calibrated for smaller 5 and 7-inch reels. So what happened was the weight of the tape, the take-up reel, that's the reel that's actually pulling the tape across the record heads, was actually, over time, it begins to strain. And what happens is the weight of the reel is too heavy for the actual reel platter, the spindle that goes through the hole you see here. And over time, the tape, it would have the effect of slowing down the recording. Even though the speaker is speaking and recording in real time, the tension on the tape is greatly reduced, like pulling on a large chain or a large spool of rope. The longer you pull on it, the more tension and weight that spool is absorbing along the way. It's kind of difficult to explain, but in essence the tape gets heavier and causes the motor to work harder. But since the motor is set at a fixed speed, the result is the tape is slowed down. So you have a variation of speed over time, whereas the speaker at the beginning, it might be very clean and regulated and paced, but by the time you get an hour into the tape, you can hear the dragging on the speaker. Even though he's speaking in real time, the effect is it's changing the pitch overall. So that's something else we have to work on. Again, it's a little bit of art and a little bit of science, and the results are mixed at times because you don't want to over process the recorded pieces because you're going to introduce more artifacts. And so it's really a judgment call at that point in terms of how far do you go in order to salvage them and make them listenable. The purpose here is to essentially reintroduce them back into broadcast format on the radio station so that they're of listenable quality. And that's actually the goal at the end of the day. We're not trying to make museum archive quality pieces, but we're trying to get the job done in the sense of getting them back to basic listenable, enjoyable quality so that they can be heard over an FM frequency and people can once again learn and be entertained by them. Okay, that's all I got for now. Thanks.